Hello, y'all. I want to give you a quick instruction. We'll see how quick it is on the NAI flute, North American Indigenous Flute. I've said this before and I'll say it again. The Native American style flute that everybody knows of. The only thing Native American about it is the way that the sound is produced. So, there's flutes in the indigenous Americas that have been made with the two chambers where you blow in, and then this reed was created to produce the sound. That has been a part of Native American flutes for as long as we know, right? For quite some time, hundreds of years. And the tuning that everybody calls the Native American flute, that was created in the late 1970s, early 1980s by Michael Graham Allen, who was not a Native American man. He was just a person, and I don't really know his story. I'm sure he was a kind, wonderful man, and he was inspired by the Native American concept of making a flute, which was using this way to produce a sound. However, he decided to tune a flute that had the easy way of blowing into it, but with a shakuhachi tuning. And so a shakuhachi traditional tuning, which is from Japan, is a 5-note pentatonic minor scale. That is where the first, what we call today, Native American flute or Native American style flute came from. Don't ask me how that name became what it is or where that came from. I have no idea why it was called the Native American flute. And I have some guesses, but maybe we don't need to go into that, because really the first person that made that tuning popular was a Native American man, and he's still playing flutes today, and that's Carlos Nakai. Thanks for inspiring the world with this awesome new tuning. And so that's where this Native American style flute came from, that was considered what everybody knows today as the Native American flute, right? But the tuning was actually first put on a flute with this way of producing it from Michael Graham Allen in, like I said, late 1970s, and it was based off the shakuhachi tuning. And so one of my mentors and elders from the Standing Rock Reservation is Kevin Locke, and he's been touring the world, and he's a traditional hoop dancer, and he's just a kind elder who's been sharing his traditional ways and stories and hoop dancing and flute playing for many, many, many years. And he's been playing flutes long before this, what everybody calls the Native American flute, was created. And so he started catching wind of this and hearing it, and he'd try to play his traditional songs on it and be like, I don't really get it. That's not our flutes. That's not, And it took him a while to figure out, how it all, and he did his own research, and he's the one that told me about Michael Graham Allen, and that Carlos Nakai made that popular, and that sound that we hear, that we identify with the Native American flute, that was because of Carlos Nakai, really, mainly. And then also another flute maker that's called Ken Light Flutes, I think is how you call it. He was the one that created the flutes that Carlos Nakai made as well. So anyway, getting with Kevin, he finds it very important to educate the world on the true Native American flute, and I'm sure there was a few depending on what area you were in, but this here tuning is one of them, and this is what we're calling the North American Indigenous Flute, and that's a name that I think that Kevin came up with on his own to identify it differently from what everybody calls the Native American flute. And he's not trying to get in some political debate of that should or shouldn't be called the Native American flute. That's neither here nor there for him. It's just that, he wants to educate people on this old traditional flute that his people played and many neighboring tribes. And these tunings, like he's got a couple old flutes that date back into the way early 1900s, maybe late 1800s, from his grandpas and his elders who were playing the flute. And their way of playing the flute was to accompany their voices. And so they would sing their traditional songs just like Kevin still does, and their Lakota songs with Lakota words, and then they would mimic the song with the flute. And this is one of the main tunings that they would use. And so this video is about how to play the NAI, the North American Indigenous Flute, okay? And so I base this off of old flutes that Kevin plays, and he's had for quite some time. And the fingering is unique and different from what we're used to. And I've watched Kevin play. You can watch his videos. You can search Kevin Locke, which is Locke, and you can find him around with YouTube videos and Facebook, etc. And I will watch him play, and he will play one of two ways. This hole that we're so used to leaving down in a 6-hole flute does not get left down in this scale. However, this is the main hole that gets left down. And so all y'all that have been interested in this scale and have been buying them, I hope that you're watching my videos. I've explained this in a couple. This is the main hole that you're going to want to keep down, and that will give you your basic scale. Okay? But Kevin, depending on what songs he's playing and what way, he also sometimes leaves the bottom hole down, and he will play like that. And then that creates another traditional melody that you can use, which is more similar to the one, at least the bottom 3 notes are quite a bit similar to what everybody knows as the Native American style flute. But then they change up here. This note is different than the one that we're used to. And it gives it more of a major scale feel. It brightens up the energy of the flute. So I wanted to tell you that, and I'm going to show you really quick, watch my fingers, how this flute is tuned and what the basic main notes of this flute are. And so if you play it by using both of the cross fingers here, like I said, you're either leaving this one down or this one down. So the way I tune it is I tune this hole, and then to tune this hole, I put this finger back down because I see that's how Kevin plays. So I want to make it as close to the tuning. And when you go womp, womp, bump, or it's going to be 1, 2, 3, that is an Aeolian minor, those first 3 notes. First 4 notes. Yeah, and so that's how that goes. And so just like a Native American flute, when you play this finger, you cross finger it with this one. Same deal, cross finger it with the one underneath it. This is your main finger that you would leave down. So see that? And so now let's practice just going up the scale, the most basic way of playing this flute. And these notes just so happen to be this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 notes. These 6 notes are the only 6 notes that you need to play Amazing Grace. That's just some weird coincidence that this traditional tuning plays Amazing Grace with all of the notes that are on it. And of course, I just want to say that, concert tuned 440 hertz and all that, I think everybody's aware that that wasn't a tradition in old world America, right? That came over here from Europe and all that other stuff where we tune in concert pitch and all of this. And my understanding is that they used the old way of tuning a flute, which was you put your hand here and you go one finger between each tuning. And then somebody with the size of the flute that they had, this scale came out of it, right? And I think that once that they'd had that scale, just like anybody else in the world would do. They really liked that scale and they started copying and reproducing it so they could continue to sing their traditional songs with that flute. So I think that's why they came up with this scale here. Anyhow, so we go up and down the scale like that, and leaving this finger down, that's your main scale. So I'm not a music theory guy. It would probably be fun if Jason, who works for Singing Tree Flutes as well, he's the music theory guy, and I think he would be able to more easily explain, when you hear this melody, that bottom note is not actually the tonic of the scale. The scale, when you listen to it, the actual main note that melodically is the ending note. This is like an additional note that is like a step below the actual scale. So that's why I think when it comes to a major scale, I don't know if I'm explaining that right, when you're doing a melodic phrase or something, I just by nature want to end at this note, not here, because that is just an added note to the scale, and the actual scale would start here. There's other flutes from India, etc., that have that as well. So actually it's this note, sorry. I hope this video doesn't make you more confused than when you started, but this is the tonic. So a lot of times when I'm playing melodies, I end on this note. I don't know if you guys can hear what I'm talking about there, but it's good when you're practicing and you're creating melodies with this new scale, leaving this finger down. Try that. You're going to be used to ending on the bottom note that we do oftentimes on the Native American style flute, but try ending on this note and seeing how it feels melodically to your songs. Okay, and so that's it. In that little phrase, I just did one high octave note, and so this one, the high octave notes are also a little bit different than the Native American style flute. There's mainly one high octave note that I get with this, and that's all fingers covered except the top and bottom. So as you're going up, so all fingers covered except top and bottom. And sometimes, depending on the flute, this is never going to be guaranteed, you can still do the roll off that I do on the Native American style flute. Oops. Yeah, my muscle memory wants to lift that hole still, but okay. So that's the basics of the main way you would play the North American Indigenous flute. Now we can try to see what it sounds like when you leave this finger down instead. And mind you, if you were really doing this appropriately and you needed it to be on pitch for a piano or whatever else, you would want to still cross finger. You'd go, oops, excuse me. So, does that sound familiar? That's the first note in a Native American style flute. So if you were doing it appropriately, you would go. But to make life simple on us, instead of putting the cross finger in there, just try to go up the scale, leaving the bottom finger down. What that means is that these notes will probably be tuned a little bit sharper. They'll sound a little bit sharper because you're not putting this finger back down as you go, but it's going to be really subtle. So without having to do the cross finger, if you just leave this finger down, you should be able to get a completely different scale. And the bottom 3 holes should sound just like a Native American style flute, right? So. But then there is really no way on this one to mimic the next note in that, pentatonic minor. We bypass that note and go up to the note above that. Do you hear that? I don't know how versed you are at the Native American style flute, but you can completely get that scale as well. Did you see how I left this ring finger down? I'm kind of learning this with you as I do this. If you leave this ring finger down, that's also another scale. That's a side shoot. That's not part of this lesson. That was an added thing. So just shows you the different things you can do. But let's just go back to straight up and down the scale, holding the bottom finger. Yep, so those are the different options. And of course you can mix and match all of those. I think I'm gonna show you something real quick that's interesting. And so I've produced this flute basically, just kind of as a favor for Kevin in a way, just to, I know it's very important to him. And so I just decided to start reproducing the scale. I'm not the only one that does it. Other people do as well. And I just sent him a good handful of flutes so that he can educate his people, educate the children. He travels around to different schools. He does all sorts of workshops and things. And, with COVID and everything, I'm sure that's changed some, but just giving him some flutes so that he can continue to share this old traditional scale. And that means traditional fingerings, the traditional style of playing, the songs that go with it. The keys that he would probably use are going to be generally an F to E in that range, low E to the F above that. And this one's a little bit higher. This is an F sharp, but it's almost there. And then he'll sing to that. So check this out though. I'm gonna grab another flute here. Let's try this bamboo flute. And you can actually get that scale on a Native American flute. And I haven't really tried to teach Kevin that you can do that because, you don't want to spend too much time teaching an old dog new tricks, you know what I mean? And he's comfortable and he's been playing his whole life with this other fingering. But check it out. It might take me a second, but I can play that scale. Oh, here it is. So most of you probably play the Native American style flute by leaving the top hand ring finger down. That's hole 4 if you're counting from the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4. Leaving this down and bypassing it to get your 5-note pentatonic minor. However, when I was first taught the flute, I was told I could do that, but I could also leave this finger down instead, and that you would get a different melody. Some people said one way is a Southern Native American type songs and the other would be Northern Native American type songs. I don't know how true that is, but that's what people were saying to me. And so let's see what it sounds like when I keep this finger down. And so now, just like we left, so let's look at this as if we were still playing the NAI, and this flute wasn't even a part of the scale. Just say that that flute wasn't there and the holes were up here. And we'll leave the second note from the bottom, just like we did on that other flute that I showed you. We leave this one down the majority of the time, which is the way we played in the beginning of the video. Okay. That's the same scale on a Native American style flute now. So you don't start with this hole, you start from this hole. And then if you're a more advanced Native American style flute player, you would know that there's usually on Singing Tree Flutes 2 notes above that we put, which gives us a relative major of whatever scale we're playing. So we go. See that roll off? Played a major scale going down. I know this is a lot for the brain, but I'll try to simplify that. If I use that roll off note, that is the highest note of that old North American Indigenous scale, starting from here. See if you can hear it. Oops, messed it up. Try that again, leaving this finger down. Oops. This bamboo flute doesn't hit the high octave notes quite so smooth, and it's a little bit tough of a transition because usually I roll off to that note. I play it like, I usually play it like that, but I'm trying to nail it with just that note. So it shows you that that scale is within the Native American style flute. The North American Indigenous flute is in there. So I'm going to try it again. Which means you can play that scale on the Native American style flute. If you wanted, for whatever reason, this more traditional layout, the more traditional fingering, it's more straightforward. You don't have to struggle with that high octave note or anything, and you want that basic scale, then you could, order a flute in that tuning. But I just wanted to show you that it is available here. And this, again, is the cheating way to do it. Flutes are tuned to have this finger down, but it sounds almost perfectly in tune. Only to the very particular ear are you going to notice that these are a hair sharp in pitch when you reverse these fingers. But I could play, that's another cheat way to play Amazing Grace on a Native American style flute. So cool, huh? Just wanted to show you that. Okay, I'll go back to this one just a second, and I think that's basically all I can give you. Remember to keep this one down to play the main melodies. Remember to put this one down if you want to cross and get more of that darker feel from that pentatonic minor sound, at least on the bottom 3 notes. Remember, the high octave notes are going to be basically the same fingering as that you get on a Native American style flute, and depending on the flute you can get a roll off as well on there, and sometimes you can even get a third. I didn't even try to do that. Again, I'll end how you'd play Amazing Grace on this one. And on this one, you don't have to get that high octave note because the highest note to the song is just right here, right? So. You guys get to see me butcher a flute song. I think it's kind of funny. All right, I hope this helps you. That was a long video, but I hope you get something good out of it. Have a great day.